So I can see we've started to get a fair few people joining in. If you can hear my voice and see my screen, please say yes in the chat. That way, when we come to launch the webinar in a couple of seconds' time, it will be absolutely seamless. So, hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to this Virtuoso webinar, Test Automation for the Logistics Industry, Keeping Your Sprints Moving. My name is Ryan Thornton. I am VP of Marketing, which means it is incumbent upon me, an absolute pleasure, a delight, and a contractual obligation to lead you through the next 30 or so minutes. I will be ably abetted by partner in test, Mr. One and Only Sales Engineer Beyond Compare, James Bent. Hello, James. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much, Ryan. And I think with that intro, it's I can only go downhill from there. You put me on a pedestal that I can only fall off from. But hopefully, let's keep the bar high, and looking forward to running this webinar with you for sure.
Equally looking forward to seeing you in a pile of feathers and wax, having shone so close to the sun just there with your witty comeback. So our agenda today, we're going to be looking at the logistics and the current pressures, the process changes, but then we're going to add a little bit of light relief, a light at the end of the tunnel, that your train's going down as it's taking its parcels correctly to the right place. In that new technology are offering new processes and new ways of doing things that really are making, test automation in logistics not the poor relation that it once was, which will be followed by the good stuff, the reason many people are here, which will be James Bent's very great demo. So we are obviously Virtuoso. We like to get shit done, so let's go through this very fast. We deliver the power of code with the ease of use of codeless. We believe that our the way in which we author tests means that the abstraction from the underlying code is just at that Goldilocks level, which gives you that accessibility without reducing the flexibility. It's for functional UI, end-to-end integration tests for web and mobile web applications. It's an easy-to-use platform that gives you a shitstorm, the good type. So that's the marketing bump about us done. Let's get on to actually talking about what we were supposed to be. So the logistics industry and test automation. It's a series of very complex, multifaceted, interconnected software solutions. And what the big risk here is that if your software doesn't work, by definition of logistics, you don't have a business. So there is always pressure on ensuring that these systems work. There's the customer facing, the integration with the ERP systems, business systems applications, not to mention that there may have been multiple acquisitions over the years and multiple different systems that have been badged together. There's also multiple options, many different products, return, delivery options, many, and every one of these, if you're thinking about going in with a continuous testing strategy, good majority are business critical. Trying to put risk next to each of these test cases ends up often being, we need to test more than we'd like. We need to get up there and often go manual. And they're non-mutable. They're in constant flux. They're changing. They're under constant pressure to release faster. That's the development team. and into a changing system. Granted, they will have, you can have testing environments, staging environments, but they do have to go into a system that's changing. Its data's constantly changing, and they need to have correct data in your testing environment before it goes into that system. It also needs to continually function. You can't take a day off. And releasing fast, which is a typo, dictates that you must test faster. And the limitations that many, I think, have viewed is that you just simply cannot author at the speed you need. And even if you could, you're burdening yourself with crippling maintenance overhead that future you will have to deal with. If we can quickly solve these problems in a way that gives you an ROI and have a test automation strategy that is fit for, as ever, a highly complex business, then we are at the races. And that is what we are going to assert today. And when I say we, James Bent is going to assert that.
And I take it that was my cue, right? We can tell we're a well-oiled machine that I stepped on it right at the time. So, but definitely, yes.
Well-oiled machine, James, yes.
But look, yeah, I mean, and Ryan, I mean, look, before I jump into what we're going to show and then show it, I mean, I'll just absolutely agree with what you said that, you know, logistics, it's, you know, we have quite a number of customers in this space where, you know, it's almost like you when you see the actual workflows and the applications, it's really quite impressive in terms, because you think, I mean, logistics is fast paced, lots of different actions going through workflows, lots of data flowing through it. It's really impressive, but it does add into the difficulties with testing that. So what we're going to show in that space is how with Virtuoso, you can perform functional UI testing of multiple apps. So we're focused on multiple browser-based platforms within a workflow, whether it's front-end portals, whether it's sort of the back-end administration business systems, looking in email boxes or, you know, looking for account information, but then combining that with integrations. So API testing. And what we mean by that is showing you how you can combine the functional UI with the integrations to start showing end-to-end flows, inclusive of testing the integration points between systems. Now, doing all that, though, in natural language. So keeping this, what we'll say, codeless, and being able to do that, whether you're building it from the app, from requirements, running it from plans, CI/CD, giving full reports, but then the ability to do things like, you know, really easy debugging. And then on top of all of this, we're going to really show you our self-healing. So using machine learning to get rid of, in the main, of test maintenance through dynamic changes. And then we're going to talk a lot about test data. So yeah, a lot of goodness. And, you know, what better way to show that than to get into a demo. So I think, Ryan, if you put us onto the next slide, which is going to be really rich in detail. There we go. Showtime, baby. And at which point I shall steal the screen and let's actually get into the platform and show it to you. So we hopefully have coming up on screen. This is Virtuoso. And we've set up a bit of a demo just on a platform that has, as part of the modules, inventory management, deliveries, managing products, and doing things like, you know, deliveries and returns. So sort of give it a feel and flavor for the logistics space. So number one, you know, you can see that we're accessing Virtuoso through the browser. We are a SaaS application. So number one, really easy to get on board. You literally just come, get signed up, and then start working immediately. Now, just to reiterate, the platform is focused on functional UI, integration, and end-to-end testing of browser-based applications. So if it's in a browser, then Virtuoso can be used to test it for functional integration and end-to-end testing using natural language. So a little bit like RPA. If I see on screen that there is products, for example, that I want to interact with, then I can simply author a step that says click on products. So we use our natural language syntax, which is really quick and easy to learn and get running with. But then I simply look at the screen and say, again, if I see the products link, then I can just write that step. To do that, there's no pre-work required. I don't have to build elements or objects or images to be able to start writing those test steps. We will show how you can definitely author, so write your test steps, but I will show you as well how you can interact with the browser to be able to start actually choosing through capture type interactions to capture what I'm doing. And we'll talk about how we do that very robustly and ensure that at all times you've got working automation. But before we do that, to sort of highlight what you can actually perform with this is, of course, we can perform steps like, going to the login screen and writing usernames and passwords in boxes. I can do sort of click actions. But then really key to running these sorts of workflows, particularly within the logistics space, is understanding that there are, within single applications, multiple modules where, we might do things like create the products. Then we have to create the orders against that, create the delivery and the shipping, the supply chain, how the products even get from one place to another. So there are a lot of interlinked modules, whether within the single application, but then bear in mind, a lot of businesses, of course, are running off multiple applications that are connected by integration points. So you've got this sort of modular approach that's also driven by data. So for Virtuoso, whether you're, literally writing your data into the test, well, okay, that's great. But then we can be doing things like using parameterized data. So starting to feed in test data to the tests to drive these with. And that can come from a number of different sources. It could come from test data. So literally building out test data tables, which you could upload from CSV files with parameterized data sets. So it could be product and SKU and then order information, delivery preferences, customer details that you create parameterized data sets and then simply map those into your journeys. So select your data points and map those in. But then we can actually start enabling you to do some really actually smarter things. So understanding in this space that testing against these types of applications and environments, test data management is a big pain point. So it's great to be able to create CSV files, but even that requires management. So actually being able to pull in and let's say make API calls. In this case, I'm getting product details, which I can then store into a response within my functional journey. So in this case, I'm calling to get a product and then storing just details about that. And then I'm using the details from that API call to then write that data into places within the UI. So it could be at the start of my test, I run an API call to get the data that's existing in the environment, store it, and then I can either search for that. So it could be utilize a product or utilize an order that's existing, but then also being able to use these API calls to sort of test the integration points. So if this were an API call that passes shipping details from an inventory platform into a shipping management portal, then we might want to make an API call that calls across. And then if we actually just jump into an example here, with the API call, we could make the call, but then assert on the response, for example, to check that we're getting, let's say, the correct status from that API call. So you can start to build out these natural language journeys. In this case, we've actually built inside our goal, our test set, a series of journeys to create a product, a receipt, a delivery order. So in that case, we were looking at before creating the product, but now we're looking at creating the delivery order. Same using the natural language approach, where when we get into looking at, in this case, building the delivery, we've assigned to say we're going to use the parameterized data, or we've got a default value if that's not mapped. And what this actually allows us to do is start building flows of tests. So if I just jump back into my project dashboard here, I can build a flow to say that when I run my create product journey, if that passes, firstly, I've defined the product here into a variable. So now when I run my next journey sequentially, my delivery order, it's going to grab the product details and map it into my delivery. So you can start actually running. This is where you come into the end-to-end testing to be able to start driving through various modules in individual granular tests. At all times when the tests are being run and executed, we are capturing screenshots for before and after interactions for your testing evidence and clear indicators as to if this is passing. And of course, it's natural language. So I can read what is being done, break it down into little checkpoint segments, which, by the way, I can reuse. So if I've got my login steps, I could be then branching a different journey off of here. So this could be my test 2, which now reuses the same test steps. But then a really cool thing here as well is that you're writing in natural language, so you really don't need to have any sort of visibility of the code side of the application. Virtuoso, though, is when these are running, we're actually looking at the DOM level of the application when the test is running. We're identifying automatically all the available selectors, so the XPath and IDs and class name for each of those selectors, and build that model. We're also, if you do want to get a little bit technical, then you've got access into the dev tools within your authoring pane. So for example, if I've got a little icon, maybe this one here, I could hover over and then see that it's actually called activities. But if it didn't, I could grab the class name and I could still write a test with that. So I could say, click on class name, for example, and use that detail. So it's actually, while this can be very simple, it can also be used for things like, and we'll look at in a second, sort of debugging through the dev tools, which we'll look at in just a moment. To give you a bit of a flavor, though, of how this actually runs, we talked about the fact the experience with Virtuoso is that we have what we call live authoring. So literally, if I go through and say, click on products, as I write that step and press enter, we go and run that immediately. So you can see the products box has opened and we can see we've written the step here. If I then say, click on products again, so that's the menu option, then again, it goes and interacts, goes and clicks that and opens up the new screen. So I'm writing my test steps here, but I could equally be coming in and interacting with the screen. Right click, click on the element, it writes my step for it, goes and runs it. And that's the really key thing here. As I'm writing my steps, we are then running it and you see that it is working. You've got the screenshots, you can validate that that's working. And then you can also be doing things like putting in your assertions. So whether I'm coming in and I want to, I don't know, it could be put an assertion in to check that something is, equals an expected value. I could be storing data. So I could come in and say, I want to store the value of this text into a variable. So let's call this purchase. And then I store that detail immediately into a variable. And then I could put an assertion in straight away. So assert that purchase contains can be, for example. So this means to actually build tests where it's not just capturing actions, but building in things like the data, whether it's storing data, the API data, the assertions, and so on. For instance, if I want to put an API call in, then I can simply just build that in and immediately run it. It's really easy to start building these tests out and all the time seeing if it goes green, then I've got working automation. And then immediately having this as I finalize it to go in and collect all of those selectors automatically to build the model of those elements, as we'll see just here. So I'm collecting XPaths, IDs, selectors to ensure that you can run this again and again, even across those complex data-driven workflows. Even where I want to come in and say, I want to actually go into a new app in the same test, I could then navigate to, let's go to the Virtuoso website, and I'm going to do that in a new tab. So in the same test, if I wanted to, I've now got my order, my inventory and delivery management tool, but then in another app, I've got another website open. So I could be actually going across those. So it's really easy to build and have rich sort of data-driven tests for end-to-end testing. But then when I come to run this, which you can do from CI/CD tools, you can do from execution plans, I'm going to run this manually. What we then see is from being able to orchestrate tests, whether I come in and tag these out, so I could sort of feature flag these or mark them as regression or smoke tests to be able to start segmenting these out, whether I come through and in my plans start orchestrating to build a plan with, let's say, could have my main logistics goal, but I want to run just certain journeys. So just maybe log in, create product, and then my delivery order. I can start, specifying which I want to run. I could run against different environments by having parameterized environment data, including things like URLs to run the same test in different environments. What you're then getting is, whether it's from a dashboard view of all your different goals, your different test sets, to then look in the project activity, whether I'm then filtering by sort of date ranges or goals or outputs, to be able to start seeing all of my version test results, including here, I've got one that I can clearly see has failed. I'll open that, see when it was run, who ran it. It was running on our Virtuoso Chrome browser in the dev environment. And if I open this up, we can see clearly we have a bug. Okay, that's an obvious one. Within the test results, you've got the natural language steps, you've got the screenshots. So I've got my testing evidence that anybody can read. But I've also got additional insights such as events where we're capturing network requests and console logs for every single step. So I could start to see if there's anything failing, could I look through even for steps that are passed within that, actually, is there something that's caused the next step to fail? If I click on the bug, again, I can see the screenshots to see, what was being done, where was it being done, when. So, I don't have to go back and try and run this again. I've got all the test outputs. But I've also got access to our root cause analysis. If I determine that actually this should have worked and it seems like a genuine bug, you can now bring engineers in to say, whether it's a message back to pipelines or a Slack notification, an email to say, this test has failed, come in, see what was being done, click on the step, look at the root cause analysis, view things like the page source, the DOM at the time the test was run, page network for the entire page console logs, but also actually come in and say, well, if I'm an engineer and I want to rerun this and start debugging it, let you come in to the actual journey itself, start running and maybe put in a pause point. And as you're doing that, you could go step by step through your test while also accessing the dev tools to start looking at things like the network, to start saying, actually, is there something in the console or the network that I've got to look at? I could put in additional pause points or just step through one at a time. So I can start actually live debugging, even if, I'm not having to actually manually replay through this. And then on top of this, one really key thing. So we talked about sort of the authoring, the executing, the reporting and the debugging. But across the top of this as well, we have what we call our self-healing. So where we see that if there are any sort of dynamic changes, so if we see, for example, that there are any sort of changes to the code side. So to give you an example here, I'll show you SAP S/4HANA as an example. What we're doing is saying, because we are automatically building that model of the element as the test is running, what we see is that on every execution, every time it runs on the browser at the app at the state it's in, we're basically going through and saying on every step, we're using machine learning algorithms to do a comparison between the previous working model. If there are then changes, it could be dynamic IDs or XPath, it could be labels through localization, or maybe I picked order ID 1, 2, 3, 4 in the first test, and now that's changed because that's moved down the table. What we're doing is using machine learning algorithms to determine if this is the same element, then we automatically heal that with a very high degree of accuracy, even against dynamic applications such as Salesforce is a great example. So what it means, it dramatically reduces down the maintenance burden through your test suite. So ease and speed to author and then to run, which you can do in parallel across environments, scale it up with test data. You've got the full test insights and the ability to debug really soon. Bearing in mind as well, when you're authoring, you can also be doing this from wireframes or designs because it's natural language. So you could even further sort of speed and get to this, shift left or in sprint testing. But then the self-healing, the reducing the burden of having to maintain otherwise flaky tests is really massive. And so while today, we're talking about the logistics industry and some of the things we're seeing within our customers within that space, the great thing with the platform is we're actually slightly agnostic to that. What we're talking about are data-driven workflows across multiple applications and integration points to functionally integration and end-to-end test those and ensure that you're able to release new features while mitigating risk and all the time doing that with speed and cost efficiencies in terms of cost per test. So I'll pause for a breath there, but otherwise that's, hopefully given you a flavor of the platform. And Ryan, hopefully through that, we may have had some questions. So I'll hand back to your good self. There we go, questions and answers, and see, do we have any? And you may be on mute. There you go.
Oh, I'm good. I've got it. I just wanted to keep you on your toes, James. Keep you on your toes. Yeah, I do like the point you make about being agnostic. Do you have a web app or interrelated web apps? Do you need to test them? Come and have a look. So do we do cross browser? And
Yes,
can we run them in parallel?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are running on our cloud hosting on a Virtuoso Chrome browser, but we do connect into grids. So we have plans that we can provide into grid providers. Equally, you can bring your own grids to be able to test cross-browser, where those grids typically are testing on real devices. What we find people do most of the time is run most of their packs on Chrome browser, obviously being Chromium, and then might run a subset towards the end of their testing cross-browser. So yes, we do support that. And yes, we do support running tests in parallel. Cross-browser, of course, the parallelism is dependent on the grid setup, but for us on Virtuoso Chrome, you'd expect to achieve 40, 50, 60 plus parallels, which you can also throttle down if you're running, let's say, in a dev environment.
We've not completed migration to the cloud and have around about a 50-50 split from on-prem to cloud. Do you offer a solution where we can look at testing both?
So we have made, and we are taking the route where for functional testing, it's browser-based technology only. And looking at sort of non-browser based, certainly from a data perspective. So if you want to be able to interact through, whether it's querying databases or through endpoints, then great. And of course, I understand if you've got monolithic apps, then you may not have endpoints. Bottom line is, no, we can't functionally test. However, it's really sort of then looks at things like whether you can get into, specifying the data entry points to the cloud side of things. So as you're going through a migration, you're almost passing in the expected data that would come from another system. So you test the cloud piece and then bring on, as you migrate, the rest of the apps across. If there's very limited interaction, then there is the potential to be able to call through and basically call via endpoints, having small programs, sort of Microsoft Power Automate, to be able to run a small subset against the desktop where it probably makes sense to. But yeah, for us, at this point in time, while there are some strategies, we do need to be clear we're not functionally testing sort of very large workflows going through purely a desktop side of things. We are browser-based with some ability to interact.
I'm going to keep you on your toes here, because it's got the word desktop in the question as this. But if one of our tests is to upload an attachment from our desktop, is there a way how we can set a test to upload a specific attachment?
Yeah, you actually can. So we have, because we're on the cloud, then we can, we obviously have a lot of customers, most of them where they're not making available their development sites. So we have a bridge client. Basically, you can run on your network to create a secure TLS tunnel. With that, it also has the benefit of being able to test on localhost. And you can actually, through that, take files through local environments and upload them. On our YouTube channel, we do have a couple of videos that talked about testing on localhost and interacting with files from there as well. So yes, that can be achieved. Otherwise, if you can put them on the cloud, then great. That's also very easy, much easier way to get them as well, but it can be facilitated both sides.
Which the bell now tolls as there are no more questions coming in. It just remains for me to thank you all for coming. I know it's not, there's a lot of competition for webinars out there at the moment. To thank my friend and colleague, Mr. James Bent.
I like how you had to think there what you're going to say, but Ryan, no, thank you very much. Another good webinar, and pleasure to run these with you always.
It will be winging its way to you and anybody you know that wasn't able to attend tomorrow. And it's just for us to say ciao, ciao for now.
Ciao, ciao for now.